The sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet evening as Tabitha Bailey ducked beneath her uncle's kitchen table, her heart hammering against her ribs. Uncle Vernon's face contorted with rage, his bloodshot eyes fixed on her as he stumbled through the small frontier cabin they'd shared since her parents' death 3 months ago. "Where's the money, girl? I know you've been hiding it from me," Vernon slurred, appending a chair as he lunged toward her. Tabitha was 18, old enough to leave but with nowhere to go in the harsh Wyoming Territory of 1878. Her uncle had seemed kind when he first took her in, but the whiskey had changed him, transforming him into something monstrous. "I don't have any money, Uncle Vernon." "I swear," she pleaded, scrambling backward as he advanced. "The ranch hasn't paid me yet." "Liar," he roared, his meaty hand swinging toward her face. Tabitha closed her eyes, bracing for the impact that never came. Instead, she heard a grunt and opened her eyes to see a tall figure standing between her and her uncle, a strong hand gripping Vernon's wrist mid-air. "That's no way to treat a lady," came a deep, steady voice. The stranger's broad shoulders blocked her view, but she could see the worn leather vest and dusty boots of a working cowboy. "Mind your own business, boy," Vernon snarled, trying to wrench his arm free. "This is family business." The cowboy's grip didn't falter. When a man raises his hand to a woman, it becomes everybody's business. Tabitha peered around him, taking in the cowboy's profile, strong jaw dusted with stubble, piercing eyes under the brim of a well-worn hat. He couldn't have been more than 25, but there was a weathered confidence in his stance. "You're trespassing," Vernon spat, reaching for the shotgun propped against the wall. In one fluid motion, the cowboy released Vernon's wrist and drew his revolver, the metal gleaming in the lamplight. "I wouldn't." Vernon froze, hatred burning in his eyes. "Miss," the cowboy said without taking his eyes off Vernon, "gather what you need. You're not staying here tonight." Tabitha hesitated only a moment before rushing to her small room, hands trembling as she stuffed her meager belongings into a worn carpet bag. She could hear the men's voices, her uncle's angry protests, and the cowboy's calm but firm responses. When she returned, the cowboy had backed Vernon into a chair, the revolver still trained on him. "I'm ready," she whispered. The cowboy nodded. "Sir, I'm taking this young lady with me. If you come after her, you'll answer to me and the sheriff." He backed toward the door, gesturing for Tabitha to step outside first. The cool night air hit her face as she stumbled onto the porch, stars scattered across the vast Wyoming sky. A chestnut horse stood waiting, stamping its hooves impatiently. "You can't just take her." Vernon shouted from inside. "She's my kin. Doesn't seem like you deserve her," the cowboy replied evenly, backing out the door and closing it firmly. He turned to Tabitha, holstering his weapon. "Are you hurt, miss?" She shook her head, clutching her bag to her chest. "No, but who are you?" "Yates North," he replied, extending a hand. "I work at the Lazy S Ranch down the valley, heard the commotion while passing by." His eyes, she noticed now, were a deep, thoughtful blue, studying her with concern. "Tabitha Bailey," she replied, taking his hand hesitantly. "Thank you, mister." "North, but I don't have anywhere to go." Inside, Vernon began shouting threats and throwing things. Yates glanced at the door, his expression hardening. "Mrs. Sullivan at the ranch is always looking for help in the kitchen. She's a fair woman, pays well too." He paused, then added, "At least until you figure things out." The door behind them rattled as Vernon began to pound on it. Yates quickly untied his horse and offered Tabitha a hand up. "It's a short ride. You can sit in front if you're comfortable with that." Tabitha glanced back at the cabin that had never felt like home, then at the hand extended toward her, a stranger offering more kindness than family. With a deep breath, she took it, letting him pull her up onto the saddle. "Hold tight," he said, mounting behind her, his arms reaching around to take the reins. As they rode away, she could hear her uncle's angry shouts fading into the distance. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in months, she felt safe. The Lazy S Ranch sprawled across the valley, a collection of sturdy buildings surrounding the main house. Despite the late hour, several windows still glowed with lamplight. Tabitha felt a flutter of nervousness as Yates guided his horse toward the largest building. "Mrs. Sullivan runs the household," Yates explained as they dismounted. Mr. Sullivan owns the ranch, but she's the one everyone answers to. He led her to the kitchen door, knocking firmly. After a moment, a stout woman with gray, streaked hair opened it, wiping her hands on her apron. Yates North, what in heaven's name brings you here at this hour? Her eyes fell on Tabitha, taking in her rumpled dress and fearful expression. And who's this, Mrs. Sullivan? This is Tabitha Bailey. She needs a place to stay and work if you'll have her. The woman's keen eyes assessed Tabitha, who fought the urge to shrink under her gaze. Can you cook, girl? Yes, madam, Tabitha replied, straightening her shoulders. And I can clean sew and keep accounts. My mother taught me before she passed. Mrs. Sullivan's expression softened slightly. Come in then, you look half-starved. She opened the door wider, stepping aside. Yates remained on the threshold. I'll leave her in your capable hands, Mrs. Sullivan. Wait, Tabitha blurted, turning back to him. Thank you, I don't know how I'll ever repay you. A half-smile touched his lips. No need, Miss Bailey, just making things right. He tipped his hat and disappeared into the darkness. Mrs. Sullivan ushered Tabitha inside, where the warmth and smell of fresh bread enveloped her. That boy's always had a soft spot for those in trouble, she commented, guiding Tabitha to a chair. Now, eat something, and then you can tell me what brings you here with nothing but a carpetbag and the clothes on your back. Over a bowl of stew and warm bread, Tabitha hesitantly shared her story, her parents' death from fever, moving in with her mother's brother, his gradual descent into drinking and violence. Mrs. Sullivan listened without interruption, her weathered face revealing nothing. Well, she said finally, you can stay in the small room off the pantry. It's not much, but it's yours as long as you work hard. We serve breakfast at dawn for the ranch hands. I'll expect you in the kitchen by 5. Yes, madam, thank you. Mrs. Sullivan's expression softened. Your uncle may come looking for you, I know. Mr. Sullivan doesn't tolerate trouble on his property. You'll be safe here. She stood, gathering Tabitha's dishes. Now get some rest. Morning comes early on a ranch. The room was indeed small but clean, with a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a peg for her clothes. After washing up, Tabitha lay down, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without fear, true to Mrs. Sullivan's word. The kitchen bustled with activity before the sun rose. Tabitha found herself kneading bread dough, while Mrs. Sullivan instructed her on the ranch's routines and expectations. By the time the ranch hands began filing in for breakfast, Tabitha's arms ached, but she felt a small sense of accomplishment. She kept her eyes down as she served plates of eggs and bacon, aware of the curious glances from the cowboys. When a pair of dusty boots stopped before her, she looked up to find Yates watching her with those thoughtful blue eyes. Morning, Miss Bailey. Settling in, she nodded, offering a tentative smile. Yes, thank you, Mr. North. Just Yates is fine, he replied, accepting a plate. No need for formalities. Then you must call me Tabitha. Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Sullivan calling for more coffee, but throughout breakfast, Tabitha found herself glancing toward Yates, seated among the other ranch hands. Once he caught her looking and smiled, causing her cheeks to warm. Days at the Lazy S fell into a rhythm. Tabitha rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast, spent mornings cleaning and baking, afternoons mending and helping with dinner preparations. The work was hard but satisfying, and Mrs. Sullivan proved to be a fair, if demanding, employer. Yates stopped by the kitchen often, sometimes with legitimate reasons, a torn shirt that needed mending, news for Mrs. Sullivan, and sometimes with transparent excuses that made the older woman roll her eyes knowingly. He would linger, asking Tabitha about her day, telling her stories about the cattle drives and the characters he'd met in his travels. One evening, a week after her arrival, Tabitha was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart froze when she recognized her uncle's drunken posture on his old mare. There you are, you ungrateful girl, Vernon shouted, dismounting clumsily. Think you can run off and leave me to fend for myself? Tabitha backed away, the wet sheet still clutched in her hands. Please leave, Uncle Vernon, I'm not coming back. He advanced, his face twisted with anger. You don't get to decide that. You're my responsibility and you're coming home now. She's not going anywhere with you. Tabitha turned to see Yates striding toward them, his hand resting casually on his holstered revolver. Behind him came two more ranch hands, their expressions grim. Vernon glared at them. "This is family business, stay out of it." "Miss Bailey works for the Lazy S now," Yates replied evenly. "And Mr. Sullivan doesn't appreciate people harassing his employees. She's my niece. She's 18 and free to choose where she lives and works." Vernon's hand moved toward the knife at his belt. Before he could draw it, Yates had his revolver out, aimed steadily. "I wouldn't," Yates warned, echoing his words from that first night. "You're trespassing on Lazy S land. I suggest you leave before Mr. Sullivan hears about this." For a tense moment, Vernon wavered, his bloodshot eyes darting between Yates's gun and Tabitha. Finally, he spat on the ground. "Fine. Keep the worthless girl. She's more trouble than she's worth." He climbed back onto his horse, pointing a finger at Tabitha. "Don't come crawling back when they tire of you." They watched him ride away, dust billowing behind him. Only when he was out of sight did Tabitha realize she was trembling. Yates holstered his weapon and approached her. "Are you all right?" She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. To her mortification, tears began to spill down her cheeks. "Hey now," Yates said gently, taking the wet sheet from her hands and passing it to one of the other men. "It's over. I'm sorry," she whispered, wiping at her tears. "He's the only family I have left, and he—" "Family is more than blood, Tabitha," Yates said, his voice soft but firm. "It's the people who treat you with respect and kindness." She looked up at him, struck by the conviction in his words. "Is that why you helped me that night? Because it was the right thing to do?" A small smile touched his lips. "Partly, and partly because I couldn't bear to see someone hurt you." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like to take you into town on Sunday if Mrs. Sullivan can spare you. The general store just got some new fabrics in and there's a social at the church." The invitation surprised her. "Like a calling?" His cheeks reddened slightly above his beard. "If you'd like to think of it that way." The other ranch hands were pretending not to listen, but their barely concealed grins gave them away. "I'd like that very much," she replied, feeling a flutter of something new and hopeful in her chest. Sunday couldn't come quickly enough. Mrs. Sullivan not only gave permission, but insisted on lending Tabitha her good shawl and a pair of delicate earrings. "That boy's been sweet on you since he brought you here," she confided as she helped Tabitha arrange her hair. "It's high time he did something about it." Yates arrived promptly at 10, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt under his best vest. The sight of him waiting by the wagon, hat in hand, made Tabitha's heart skip. The ride to town was filled with easy conversation. Yates told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, losing his parents to influenza when he was 16, and making his way west to find work. "So you understand," Tabitha said softly. "Being alone in the world," he nodded, his eyes on the road. "It shapes you. Makes you value the connections you do find." In town, Yates escorted her through the general store, insisting on buying her a length of blue calico that matched her eyes. They browsed the bookshop, where he surprised her by purchasing a collection of poetry. "I didn't take you for a poetry reader," she teased as they left the store. He smiled sheepishly. "There's a lot you don't know about me yet, Tabitha Bailey." The yet hung between them, full of promise. At the church social, Tabitha met the small community of ranchers, shopkeepers, and their families. Most welcomed her warmly, though she noticed a few young women eyeing Yates with interest and her with speculation. "Don't mind them," a friendly woman named Clara whispered to her. "Yates North has been the most eligible bachelor in these parts for 2 years, and you've accomplished in weeks what they couldn't in months, getting his full attention." As they shared a plate of pie at one of the tables, Sheriff Morgan approached them, his expression serious. "Miss Bailey." "I'd like a word, if you don't mind." Tabitha tensed, but Yates's reassuring presence beside her gave her courage. "Of course, Sheriff. Your uncle came to my office yesterday, claiming you were taken against your will, said some cowboy kidnapped you." Before she could respond, Yates began to protest, but she placed a hand on his arm. "That's not true, Sheriff. I left willingly after my uncle tried to hit me. Mr. North intervened and offered me safe passage to the Lazy S, where I'm now employed." The sheriff nodded slowly. "That matches what Mr. Sullivan told me when I asked him about it. Your uncle was quite insistent, though." Vernon Bailey is a drunk and a liar, Yates said flatly. He's been harassing Tabitha since she left, Sheriff Morgan sighed. I figured as much. I've had run-ins with Vernon before. He turned to Tabitha. If he bothers you again, you let me know. In the meantime, I've warned him to stay away from the Lazy S. Thank you, Sheriff, Tabitha said, relief washing over her. As the sheriff walked away, Yates took her hand, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. I won't let him hurt you, Tabitha. I promise. The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. I know. The ride back to the ranch was quieter, a comfortable silence settling between them. As they approached the ranch house, Yates slowed the wagon. I had a wonderful day, Tabitha said, reluctant for it to end. So did I. He hesitated, then asked, May I call on you again next Sunday? She smiled. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, but he stepped back, ever the gentleman. Good night, Tabitha. Good night, Yates. As summer progressed, their Sunday outings became a cherished ritual. Sometimes they rode to the nearby creek for a picnic. Other times they attended town gatherings or simply sat on the ranch house porch, reading to each other from Yates's growing collection of books. With each passing week, Tabitha felt herself falling deeper for the quiet, thoughtful cowboy who had saved her that night. She learned that, beneath his capable exterior, was a man who quoted Shakespeare, wrote letters to his late mother's sister in Missouri, and dreamed of someday having his own small ranch. In turn, she shared her own dreams of perhaps teaching someday, of having a home filled with books and laughter, of never again living in fear. Yates listened to her with a respect few had ever shown her, making her feel as though her thoughts and feelings mattered. One warm August evening, they sat by the creek, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Yates had been unusually quiet, almost nervous. Is something wrong? Tabitha finally asked. He shook his head, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. I've been saving for this since the first day I took you to town. He opened his palm to reveal a simple silver ring with a small pearl. Tabitha Bailey, I know we haven't known each other long in the grand scheme of things, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears sprang to her eyes as she looked from the ring to his hopeful face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Yates. His smile could have outshone the setting sun as he slipped the ring onto her finger. When he kissed her, gentle and reverent, Tabitha knew she had found not just safety, but home. News of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and town. Mrs. Sullivan insisted on hosting the wedding at the Lazy S, declaring that Tabitha was as good as family now. The date was set for October, when the cattle drives would be done and the ranch less busy. 2 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck. Tabitha was in town picking up supplies when she spotted her uncle stumbling out of the saloon. She tried to hurry past, but he saw her, his face contorting with anger. There's my ungrateful niece, he slurred, grabbing her arm. Heard you're marrying that cowboy. Think you're too good for your own blood now. Let go of me, Uncle Vernon, she said firmly, trying to pull away. His grip tightened painfully. Not until you listen. I've had enough of being disrespected. That ranch owes me for taking you away. You're drunk. Go home. His other hand rose to strike her, but before it could fall, someone grabbed him from behind and spun him around. It wasn't Yates, but Sheriff Morgan. That's enough, Vernon, the sheriff said, pushing the man away from Tabitha. I warned you to stay away from her. Vernon lunged at the sheriff, a mistake that earned him a night in jail and a strong warning to leave town or face charges of assault and public drunkenness. When Yates heard what happened, his face darkened with anger. He won't stop Tabitha, not until he's forced to. What can we do? She asked, rubbing her bruised arm. Yates was quiet for a moment, then said, I have an idea, but you might not like it. The next day, Yates, Tabitha, and Sheriff Morgan rode to Vernon's cabin. The sheriff remained mounted, watching from a distance while Yates helped Tabitha down from her horse. Vernon emerged at the sound of their arrival, shotgun in hand. Get off my property. We're not here to fight, Yates called, keeping Tabitha slightly behind him. We're here to make you an offer. Vernon's bloodshot eyes narrowed suspiciously. What kind of offer? Tabitha and I are getting married. After that, we'll be moving to a small ranch north of here. I've been saving to buy it for years." "Good riddance," Vernon spat. "This cabin and land were her parents' property," Yates continued steadily. "By rights, half of it should be hers." Vernon's face reddened. "It's mine now. They left it to me." "Actually," Tabitha spoke up, "they left it to both of us. I found the deed among Mother's things before I left." Vernon shifted uncomfortably, confirming her suspicion that he'd known this all along. "Here's our offer," Yates said. "We'll sign over Tabitha's half of the property to you, free and clear. In exchange, you leave her alone. Permanently. No more following her, no more threats, no more showing up drunk and making scenes." Vernon eyed them warily. "And if I refuse," Yates gestured to the sheriff. "Then we file a formal claim and let the courts decide. Sheriff Morgan has witnessed your behavior. How do you think a judge would rule?" For a long moment, Vernon stood in silence, his knuckles white around the shotgun. Finally, he lowered the weapon. "Fine, bring the papers tomorrow." "Now get off my land." As they rode away, Tabitha felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Do you think he'll honor the agreement? With the sheriff as witness, he'd be a fool not to," Yates replied. "Besides, he's getting land for free. Even Vernon can recognize a good deal when he sees one." True to his word, Vernon signed the papers the next day, barely looking at Tabitha as she formally relinquished her claim to her childhood home. It hurt more than she expected, but as Yates had gently reminded her, "It's just land, Tabitha. Our home will be wherever we make it together." The wedding day dawned clear and cool, the aspen trees surrounding the lazy S ablaze with autumn gold. Mrs. Sullivan had transformed the ranch house with wildflowers and ribbons, and the bunkhouse cook had prepared a feast that would feed the entire county. Standing before the traveling preacher in a dress of cream-colored silk, a gift from the Sullivans, Tabitha felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since before her parents' deaths. Yates, handsome in a new suit, looked at her with such love that tears threatened to spill from her eyes. "I, Yates North, take thee, Tabitha Bailey, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he recited, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When it was her turn, Tabitha's voice trembled with emotion, but her hands were steady as she placed the ring on Yates's finger. "I, Tabitha Bailey, take thee, Yates North, to be my lawfully wedded husband." The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing, music, and more food than they could possibly eat. As they prepared to leave for their new home, a modest but sturdy cabin on 20 acres of good grazing land, Mrs. Sullivan embraced Tabitha tightly. "You've become like a daughter to me," the older woman said, her eyes misty. "Don't be strangers, you hear?" "Never," Tabitha promised. "We'll visit often." Mr. Sullivan presented them with a wedding gift, 2 fine young heifers to start their herd. "Every ranch needs a beginning," he said, shaking Yates's hand. "You've earned this, son." As they rode away in their loaded wagon, rice falling from their clothes and the calls of well-wishers fading behind them, Tabitha leaned against her husband's shoulder. "Are you happy?" Yates asked, his arm secure around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "When you stopped my uncle that night, you didn't just save me from a beating. You saved my future." He kissed her softly. "We saved each other, Tabitha. I was drifting before I found you. Now I have a purpose." Their new home awaited them, a blank canvas for the life they would build together. There would be challenges ahead, harsh winters, unpredictable markets, the endless work of building a successful ranch. But as they approached the cabin that would be their first home as husband and wife, Tabitha knew that whatever came, they would face it together. 5 years later, Tabitha stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching Yates teach their 3-year-old son, Thomas, to ride his first pony. Their daughter, Emma, just a year old, cooed in her arms, reaching for the bright autumn leaves floating on the breeze. The ranch had prospered beyond their expectations. What had started with 2 heifers had grown to a respectable herd, and their cropland produced enough to see them through the winters with surplus to sell in town. Word had reached them last winter that Vernon had finally drunk himself to death, alone in the cabin. Tabitha had felt a complex mixture of grief and relief, sorrow for the uncle she'd never really known, the one who might have existed before the whiskey took hold, and relief that the shadow of his anger no longer hung over her. Yates lifted Thomas from the pony and carried him back to the house, the boy chattering excitedly about his adventure. As they approached, Yates caught her eye and smiled that same smile that had first given her hope on a dark night 5 years ago. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" he asked, setting Thomas down to run to his mother. "How different life can be when someone stands between you and harm," she replied, shifting Emma to make room for Thomas against her skirts. "How a single moment of courage can change everything." Yates wrapped his arms around his family, pressing a kiss to Tabitha's temple. "Best decision I ever made, stopping at that cabin, though I didn't know then I'd be gaining a whole world." As the autumn sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Tabitha thought of all the twists and turns that had led her here: the grief, the fear, the courage, the love. From the ashes of loss had risen something beautiful and enduring. "I love you, Yates North," she whispered. "And I love you, Tabitha North," he replied, his voice carrying the same wonder it had the first time he'd said those words by the creek. "Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows."